it's more than just supply, isn't it?
Well, no, Tom. I mean, it's a question of supply. We've had some 3 million doses that haven't been made available to Australia as they said they would. So, I know that the PM has spoken at length about this morning. You can't put something into arms if they haven't arrived in Australia. Now, as the PM also said this morning, we're one of only 20 countries that have developed our own sovereign capability through the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories in Melbourne. So we foresaw that these sorts of things could happen. There's always problems when you're relying on supply chains from overseas. We didn't put all our eggs in one basket.
And what about the local, though?
Very fortunate.
I mean, we don't even know when they're going to get up to 1 million CSL. They started production and the process in November, and they're not up there.
Well, what we are seeing,
Tom, disappointing, isn't it?
Well, no, what we are seeing is rollouts before Easter of some 800,000, 850,000 vaccines per week. And as the PM also was talking about in his presser this morning, that it does take time to get those through the vetting stage. All of them have to be checked through the TGA. For quality, we don't want to be putting vaccines into people's arms that haven't reached that certain quality that Australians demand, and then we've got to get them on the road and out to people, out to clinics, and that'll take some time. So I heard one figure being announced that there could be as many as a million vaccines which are in trucks right now. So look, I would just once again urge people to please be patient. We are working very, very hard to get this rolled out as soon as we possibly can.
Okay. Peter, on this, it's fair enough to call out the EU at least when they say only 250,000 vaccines blocked. They can't export it at the moment. They won't be given export licences. That is AstraZeneca. And that is going to affect 3 million vaccines. That seems pretty evident, doesn't it?
Well, last week it was the state's fault. This week it's the EU's fault. And we can all remember when there was criticism of the Health Minister and the Prime Minister for not signing up to a number of contracts for different suppliers. And they took great umbrage at the suggestion that they should have signed up for more contracts and this would all be fine. And it's turned out that it's not all fine. And the problem...
Well, given global shortages, is there any guarantee that more contracts would have helped? Isn't it all about our local supply now?
It is now, but more contracts, could they have hurt? No. And what also the problem for the Prime Minister is so many announcements about how great everything was and what a great job he was doing, and how we were going to have 4 million vaccinations by the end of last month. He didn't take the Australian people with him when things weren't going so well, but he wanted to be there when things were going well. And is it any wonder? And the other problem that you alluded to, Tom, of course, is that it's not just a supply issue. On the ground, people don't know what's happening. GPs are ringing my office because they don't have enough supply and they don't know why they don't. Nursing homes,
just on the CSL aspect,
they don't know.
Just on the CSL aspect, we have one local manufacturer. We had one before the pandemic. We've got one during it. There's nothing that the government could have done differently there. Do you agree with that? They're apparently having issues with bottling it and so on, but that's CSL. The government can't control that, can it?
Well, the government was very keen, and the Prime Minister in particular was very keen to have numerous photo opportunities at CSL and hold up vials and say how great everything was.
But that doesn't mean they can do any more about difficulties with the process.
Well, was he telling people that there might be difficulties with the process? Was he telling people that they should be patient? No, he was making big announcements about how great he was and how great everything was, which is now why people across the country and people in my electorate are saying, hang on a minute, this is not what you were telling us was going to happen.
All right, I want to get to what's happening today, another meeting on, well, a push to do more to reduce domestic violence in Australia, particularly violence against women. Andrew Wallace, it's pretty easy to be cynical about this. This has suddenly become a priority.
Well, Tom, it is a priority when we're seeing one woman die at the hands of her partner or former partner every 8 days. You will know that the Social Policy and Legal Affairs Committee, on which both Peter and I are on, I chair the committee, released a report last week, an 88 recommendations bipartisan report. I thank Peter for the work that she did in that inquiry, which lays the groundwork for what we hope will be the next national plan to reduce violence. And it's so important. We urge, as a committee, all women ministers all across the country to look at those 88 recommendations and implement them urgently.
Peter, where do you sit on that? I think I'm correct in thinking this is the committee that looked at social media needing 100 points of ID to be able to open an account.
Yeah, one thing, I agree with Andrew about how much work we did, but I'm not just calling on women ministers across the country to do something about this. In fact, I'm calling predominantly on male ministers to stand up and do something about this. There were 88 recommendations, and we had additional comments. The Labor members, including things like more emphasis on gender equity and a gender equity strategy being urgent, and paid domestic violence leave, and also saying, look, everything should be on the table, and we congratulate the ambition of everyone on the committee, but some of the recommendations will need to be looked at about how they will be applied. I think it's obviously beyond time that the Prime Minister realised that there is an issue with domestic violence, with sexual violence, and fundamentally with gender inequality across this country. But it's pretty disappointing when we see yesterday terrific photographs of the first meeting of the so-called Women's Ministers Task Force. And the two things I've heard relevant Minister Ruston say since then is no, won't do anything to make improvements to paid parental leave. And if domestic violence services say that they need more money, they should go to the states and ask for more money. It does not seem to accord in any way, shape or form with any newfound dedication by the Prime Minister to really...
All right, we're nearly out of time. What's your response to that, Andrew Wallace?
Look, I think it's unfortunate that Peter's using this as an opportunity when we did have a bipartisan approach, and I think we still do have a bipartisan approach
absolutely.
to
That's why I
dealing
started
with this issue.
Saying that, Andrew. I agree.
Yeah, well, then stick with that bipartisan approach, Peter. We've worked really hard
what
over
about
the
the federal
last 8
funding,
months.
Andrew? Is there no more money in the federal coffers for this issue?
These are matters that will no doubt be dealt with in the budget. So, I'm not going to sit here and make an announcement about how much the federal government. Well, there could well be, and I hope there is. But I do want to pick up on something that Peter did talk about, that it's up to not just the women's ministers, and that's right. It's not just up to the men either. It is up to 25 million Australians to be dealing with this issue. This issue is bigger than just government. It's up to 25 million Australians to put an end to family, domestic and sexual violence.
I absolutely agree with Andrew on that, and the need for us to show leadership, and Andrew certainly did as chair of that committee.